Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. I'm so excited today because it is so bright outside that I don't have to use my ring light, because this little ring light always makes an annoying noise when I'm filming. It doesn't pick up on the camera, but like my hearing's too good. I hate my hearing for that, so like I hear the buzzing of this when it's on, and I'm just so glad that I can use natural light. Oh my god, what's my cat doing? Anyways, don't mind her being a little freak back there. Today I'm going to be doing my March reading wrap up for 2025. I should pull up my stats right now so I can tell you what my stats were for the month. If my laptop will load. My laptop has been sucking at loading things lately. I don't know why. Same with my phone. Am I just cursed right now? Maybe I'm cursed because I'm being cringe and using a Twilight palette, and maybe the universe is like, you are cringe, so we will curse your loading times. So I read 8 books in the month of March. My average star rating was 3.5 stars, which is pretty good considering the first 2 months of the year my average star rating was below 3 stars, which I view as really bad. And I do have a favorite and least favorite book that you will find out later in this video. So without further ado, let's cover these books. The first one was a chunker. Oh my god, I didn't finish it until the 19th. Okay, so apparently I finished this big chunky book like 2/3 of the way through the month, and then the other 7 books were in the last like 11-12 days of the month. So without further ado, let's just cover this. First up, we have House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition cover, so that's why the name isn't on the front of the book, because it has this pretty design instead. I was gonna buy a matching copy for the second book, but it's so expensive used now, and I try and buy my Sarah J Maas books used. So I did order a used copy. It's just not gonna match, but whatever. So this is the first book in this series, and they are chunkers. Look at how thick that is. This is probably the longest book that I've read in a while. I don't know if it's longer than Deathly Hallows, but if it is, this might be the longest book I've read. I don't know. It feels like the longest book I read. No, I take that back. I think Kingdom of Ash and the Throne of Glass series that I read last year, I think that's bigger. Why does Sarah J Maas write such chunky books? Anyways, so this book is about this girl named Bryce, and so Bryce is half fae, half human, and she doesn't really have powers like that are super epic or anything, and her best friend early on in the book gets murdered, and they think that they caught the person who murdered her best friend, but a couple years later more murders are starting up again, and these murders are exactly the way that Bryce's best friend was killed. So there is an archangel, and he has some angels who work under him as slaves, and he brings one of his angels over to go see Bryce, and he's like, you are connected to this case because you are connected to your best friend dying, so you're gonna work with this angel who's my slave, and you're gonna figure out who's committing these murders. So it's sort of like a murder mystery, but it's set in this really complex and elaborate world. There's so many species and so many different houses that each species fall under, which is really interesting, but you do have to memorize a lot of stuff, so it took quite a while before I became fully invested in this book. And there's romance in it, of course, because all of Sarah J Maas's books have romance in it. So after I got invested in this world, I was sucked in and absorbed, and I fell in love with the world and all the different species in here. But before I fell in love with it completely, I was really interested in the characters. I think Bryce is a really strong main character. She does get slightly annoying at times, however, I still really like her as a character. She's probably one of the better Sarah J Maas protagonists in my opinion. I really liked Hunt as a character, despite the fact that I have one major ick about like one statement that he like thinks, but besides that I really liked him. I thought he was really interesting. I thought he was a great love interest, and I really like Bryce and Hunt together as a couple, and I feel like Bryce really shines and she sort of becomes this like amazing character that I love when she's with Hunt. And I really like the side characters a lot. I really love Donica, Therian, Rune, Declan, Flynn, and a lot of the other side characters. I think the side characters were just as good, if not better, than the main 2 characters in this book. I also really like the fights in here. I thought that the fights were described really well and written really well, to a point that like it was really easy to follow what was going on. Sometimes I struggle reading fights in books because I struggle to follow what's exactly going on in the action and how everything's going down, but I thought that they were written so well in this one. Now, it is a Sarah J Maas book. I'm not gonna lie, every single Sarah J Maas book I read has had gross sentences in it to do with gender. Like, there's so many things that are gendered that don't need to be gendered that just get a little gross with Sarah J Maas, and I don't know if it's like intentional or if she's just like doing it without meaning to, but I'm always surprised that like an editor doesn't like cut these out, because I think her writing would be so much better if she just cut out those yucky sentences. Like, I'm gonna give an example that I'm making up on the spot, but I've read ones that are like really similar. So for example, I could say like, Hunt stared at her with a possessive male glare, and I'm like, why are we calling that a male glare? Like, it's weird. It's gross. Another example would be like, try to be like, and he grabbed me with that thick maleness or something like that. Like, it's just weird, those sentences. But whatever, I can ignore most of them. I get pulled out of the story briefly, can easily get pulled back into the story, but they are gross. And so that makes it really hard for me to like give high star ratings to Sarah J Maas's books, because she has those weird gross sentences in there that are gendered and just weird. And we don't need constantly talk of male and female in the book. Like, you can also just call them women and men. Like, it's not that big a deal. So I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it despite Sarah J Maas's weird writing. I think it's a really great start to this series. I think you have to commit to reading through a lot of dense information before you start enjoying the book, because I think it was like 300 pages in before like I fully understood and had everything memorized that I need to memorize to understand the world. So I did really enjoy this one. I will be continuing with the second one. I'm reading it with my book club, and my book club will be linked down in the description below if you would like to join. So I have a Shonen Jump subscription, which is like $2.99 a month or something like that, $1.99, $2.99, something around there. And so I try and read at least one manga per month on Shonen Jump. If I read at least one manga per month, I'm technically getting my money's worth, because if I were to buy a manga at a store, it would be $9.99. So in the month of March, I read Death Note Volume 8, which is called Target. It's by Tsugumi Oba. The illustrator is Takashi Obata, and the translator is Tetsuricho Miyake. So the Death Note series, in case you don't know, starts off with this guy who discovers a Death Note, and the Death Note is this journal where when he writes in the journal, he writes like the name of someone that he wants to die and potentially how he wants them to die. They will die. So he possesses like the power of a god for having this journal. However, he doesn't have the notebook for very long before there is this detective that starts working on his case and starts figuring out who he is, and it is this mystery where it's like they're trying to solve who is murdering these people and they're trying to stop that person, but at the same time the murderer is a little bit working with the police force because his dad is a police officer. So this series starts off really good, in case you haven't heard me talk about it. It starts off really good, and then it goes really downhill. And I just like have not been that big of a fan since like I think it was like volume 4 or volume 5 that I just like lost interest in the series. So I feel like at this point I'm just reading it because I made it to like volume 6 before I was like, maybe I should quit. But then since I've read so far, I'm like, it's only 12 volumes. I should just finish. So that's why I read volume 8 in March, and that's why I'm going to be finishing the rest of the series unless something happens in like volume 9 or 10 that is so horrific that I can't force myself to continue. So basically, I found this volume to just be okay. I found it mediocre. I found it slightly boring, and I want it to go back to what it was in the first 2 volumes of the Death Note series. There was a couple things I did like about this volume in particular, though. I really liked the creative setting of the hostage situation. I can't go into that more, but there was some creative settings and landscapes put in there with that. And I also really like Nier. Now, everyone keeps telling me that they hate Nier and that like it's a thing in the fandom to hate Nier, and I'm like, oh my lord, is my favorite character gonna do something really horrific? Because I personally really like Nier. I don't really like any of the other characters at this point, and it would really disappoint me if somehow my favorite character turns into trash by the end of the series. But I'm gonna keep reading at least for a little bit longer to see what happens with Death Note. So I ended up giving volume 8 3 stars. It was just an okay read, which is where the 3 stars come from, because 3 stars could mean I like it, or it could mean that it's just okay. And we're gonna hear about another 3-star read next, and this one is one that I liked. So let's dive into it. I read Check Please. So this is Check Please book 1, Hockey. So Check Please started out as a webcomic. So when you buy the physical copies of the books, it has freshman year and sophomore year put together in one book. It also has extra comics, like, I'm gonna have to cuss here. It has Hockey Shit with Ransom and Holster, Winter Screw, and Shitty and Jack's Dibs. And then there's also some tweets in here. So there's extra stuff, but this is mainly just like the first 2 years of these boys in college. So basically it follows this guy, and His name is Eric Biddle, and Eric here used to be a figure skater, and he recently converted to hockey, and he was playing in just like small leagues back at home, small like co-ed leagues, and in this one he has joined a college hockey team. So it is a queer romance, which is why I wanted to read this one. I heard so many good things about it, and I was like, oh my god, a queer romance and hockey, I thought would be like really cute. And I do think that it's a pretty cute story. This character Eric, he's called Biddle in the story. I really liked Biddle. I thought he was a really fun character to follow, and I felt like he carried the story for a lot of the story. I also really loved the romance in here. There's not very much romance in here though, because it's a very slow burn romance, and I wanted more from the romance, but I think I'm gonna get that more in book 2, which is the second half of the series that follows year 3 and 4 of Biddle's time in college. Now, there was a couple of issues I did have with this graphic novel. So first of all, I felt like a lot of the scenes were really short and ended before they were even finished, which left me feeling really unsatisfied. Like, it would start a scene and you would think like, oh, this is such a fun scene, the scene's gonna finish, and then before you reach the finish it just abruptly stopped. I didn't like that. It left me wanting more, and I felt like if the scenes were expanded, this book would have been a lot better. My other problem with this book is that I felt like it lacked depth. Like, it felt like there was a lot of serious topics that were brought up that could have been explored on really deep levels, and it just didn't take that extra step to fully explore them really well. So for example, like, it talks about being queer in a small town in Georgia. That can be a topic that's really serious and can be addressed in lots of depth, and it just isn't. There's also talk of drug rehab, and that too is not addressed in depth. So I felt like there was a lot that could have made this book better. However, I did find it overall pretty cute. It was very quick to read, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Would I recommend it? Probably, yeah, if you want a cute like romance. I don't think it really lives up to the hype for me. Also, it's free online, so you could read it free online unless you want the physical copy. Next up, I read a manga. So I read Kakaguri Volume 2. This series is called Compulsive Gambler, and the story is by Hamura Kawamoto. So this series is about this girl named Yumiko, and Yumiko is starting at this academy, and in this academy the social hierarchy is decided by gambling, and Yumiko already creates a scene when she gets there. She starts like challenging some really high-ranked people in the social system at the school to gambling, and she makes some really risky moves. And so it's sort of like focusing on her and all the risk that comes in there, but it's also focusing on this guy and this guy is sort of like captivated by her and like trying to help her out because this guy was saved by her early on in the series. So volume 2 had my favorite gamble from the anime, so I was really excited to read this one. It just is like a really satisfying gamble. There's such a satisfying ending. There's such a sense of like justice that happens in the gamble. I also really like Tsubomi, and I like her backstory. She's a very minor character, but she is very memorable for me, and I really like her. And also, as I'm reading the manga, like, I didn't get this sense in the anime, but low-key I ship them. They would be really cute together. And I didn't ship them when I was watching the anime, but reading the manga, I'm like, cute and gay. I love it. Now, the problem with this series though, and possibly the reason why there will probably never be a Kakaguri book that I give 5 stars, is that there's so much sexualization of minors in here. Like, it's really, really bad. Like, I have some pages in here that I don't feel comfortable discussing in full detail and showing on camera, but like, I love everything else about the series, which kills me. And this volume in particular, there's this character named Midori who's introduced. It's gonna get messy as it goes on because like, she is the most sexualized character in this, and they're all minors. There's like very little adults in here, if any. Where is Midori? So yeah, her. Why is she sexualized so much? It's really gross. But yeah, I ended up giving this volume 4 out of 5 stars. I'm guessing that most of the series will be 4 out of 5 stars. I doubt I'm gonna have a 5-star in this series, as I said. Then I read another manga, but this manga is a standalone manga, and it's one that had a big impact on me. So this one is called Is Love the Answer? It's by Uta Isaki. So I got this one when I was in Connecticut a couple years ago on vacation, and I got it because it's a manga and it's ace. how often do you see actual ace representation in a manga? I was so excited. So I finally read this one. It follows this girl, and this girl is Chika, and Chika here is in high school, and she is discovering her sexuality and trying to figure out which labels fit her best. It is a very relatable story for me. I related to a lot of her experience of trying to figure out her labels and trying to figure out who she is. I also related a lot to the aphobia that she experienced. I feel like for a lot of my life I dealt with like casual aphobia, and then last year for the first time I dealt with some really extreme aphobia that really impacted me, and I wish I could cover that in more detail. Maybe someday I'll get the courage to, but like I just related to the aphobia stuff so much, which is sad, but like it was written so well to get people to understand how aphobia looks and how it impacts people. I also really liked how the story explored a lot how identity is fluid and how people don't perfectly fit into a lot of different labels. Like we think so much that like labels are important, they define who you are, but like it's more complicated than that, because labels can be important in identifying who you are, but it's also hard to find a label that perfectly helps you describe yourself. And I personally struggle with that a lot. Yeah. Again, something that I would love to talk about in more detail if I had more courage, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. There is one thing I didn't like about this one. So I didn't like Enomoto. Can I even find a picture of her in here? I found her. So Enomoto is right here. I really hate her character. And I hate her character because there's this scene where characters are coming out and they're talking about how hard their life is, being queer and being ace. And then Enomoto is like, my life is really hard too. I am obsessed with boys love manga. Like, this could have been the opportunity to have strong ally representation in here and to show how a good ally would respond to their friends coming out as queer. And instead, she's like, guess what? Things are hard for me because I like to read books about men who love each other. And I was like, are you effing serious? Like, it pissed me off so much that I actually docked a star off my rating. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I considered giving it 5 out of 5 stars, but that spot in the manga irked me so much. So I do recommend this one though. I think it's great. I think it's great for teaching about asexuality and for teaching about like labels and identity, and I think there's great things in here for everyone. I think ace people will see seen and understood by it, but I also think that people will learn a lot about asexuality and view asexuality different from reading this book. So yeah, highly recommend this one, even though I didn't give it 5 stars. Just ignore Enomoto, pretend she isn't in here. And then I read my most anticipated book of the year, and I love it so much that it's gonna be hard to talk about it, because sometimes when I love a book so much, I can't like coherently put my words together for like why I love it so much. Like Harry Potter, like I love it so much, it's hard to like describe why I love it so much and to write like a comprehensive review sometimes. So this one is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. A little story about trying to get this book. My dad wanted to get me an early Easter present. He went to Barnes & Noble, they didn't have it, so he reserved a exclusive edition at different Barnes & Noble. We're sort of like in between 2 Barnes & Nobles with my house location, so like you go either 30 minutes one way or 30 minutes the other way to get to Barnes & Noble, but they were like, yeah, we'll reserve a copy. So they called over to the other Barnes & Noble, so we showed up the next day when they said we should show up to pick up the book, and they didn't have an exclusive edition for me. Yeah, they messed up. They screwed up pretty bad, so that sucked, but also I don't care because I still read the book. And look, they gave me $5 off. I don't know if it was originally $5 off or if they felt bad and gave me $5 off, but either way, I'll take it. Let's admire the embossing. Beautiful. So this is Haymitch's Games, in case you don't know. So I do recommend reading the original trilogy and the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes before you pick up Sunrise on the Reaping, because it connects the trilogy with the first prequel really, really well. So I love this one. I knew I would love this one because I've always been obsessed with Haymitch's Games. I mean, the mention of Maisley and the importance of the Mockingjay pin in the main series was something that I really loved. I used to be a role player and I really role played mage a lot, so the Underseas are characters that like I became really interested in, or I think she's like a Donner in here because like Mage's mom becomes an Undersea through marriage, I think is the way it works. I knew I would like it, and I was also obsessed with like this Haymitch fan film that I watched all the time when I was in middle school and high school. So I loved this one. I loved all of the characters. My favorites were probably Maisley and Ampert. I love them so much, although I also really liked Lulu and Luella. So the 50th Games is the Court of Quell, so there's twice as many tributes, in case you don't know, which makes the story really interesting, and it's a very different Hunger Games than any of the other books so far. And I don't want to spoil too much, but there's just so much about the world and about characters that you may already know that are just so interesting to learn about, and it makes me want so many other games for different characters. I'd also really, really, really love a game that follows a character who isn't District 12, because as I was reading this, I was like, it's sort of odd that we're only following games where there's a District 12 tribute that wins. And I'm like, would be nice if it explored more districts, but I still really like this one. I also really love the arena and all the different twists that were in the arena and stuff. So I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. It's my first 5-star of the year, which is really exciting. I feel like this one really deserves to be my first 5-star of the year. I really hope I find more 5 stars this year, because I felt like last year I didn't have very many 5 stars, and this year I have 1 5-star so far. And I'm like, that's a little disappointed that I'm not having more books that I'm loving. Okay, so this next one, before I show you the cover, I just want to clarify, this is not a spicy romance. I don't understand why the cover is like what it is, and also I don't like when books have covers that are just shirtless men. Anyways, here's the cover. The book is called Damon. It is part of the Rogue County MC series, and it's by Lisa Louvel. I don't really know how to say that last name. So this is the first book in the series, and it's like a short story novella situation. It's like only 18 pages, 27 pages, I lied. So basically it follows 2 different characters. So there's Damon, and he's trying to join the like Rogue County Rangers. So he's trying to join this like sort of like police force in this small town, and he is about to take the test when Isla comes up, and Isla is his ex, and Isla still lives in the town that they both grew up in and spent their time through high school in there. Now her hometown is starting to have problems because there are cattle thieves that are coming in and causing problems, and the police basically won't do anything in her hometown. So she gets desperate and she goes to Damon for help. And this is a romance, but I feel like a romance never really reached a satisfying peak, which is really disappointing to me. So like, just keep that in mind. I feel like it's very much just like, get a sneak peek of what's coming in the series. However, the fact that the romance didn't reach a satisfying end was disappointing, because each book in this series follows a new couple, so we aren't going to get any more in-depth of the romance between these 2 characters. I really like Damon as a character. We don't get to see him very much, obviously, because it's such a short story. However, I really liked him, but I feel like what really carries this story is Lisa's writing style. I feel like she's a really great writing style. It makes it so that I want to check out other of her books. I don't know if I'm going to be continuing on with this series in particular, but I feel like she's a really intelligent and smart writer, to the point where like I really enjoy it. I think she could use some help making her stories feel more complete and satisfying. However, I do really like her writing style. I thought it was really beautiful. Now onto the flaws of the story, because there is a lot. So Isla was really annoying, and she's a straight up jerk, and it talks about how in the past she was like sweet when they were like dating, and I'm like, we needed some more scenes to like make her become sweet and lovable again to make the romance believable. Also, as I said, the book isn't spicy despite the cover, and I thought that was a bit of an issue. Not because I need spice in books, I really don't care one way or the other. However, I also felt like the book was incomplete. Like I said, it felt incomplete because it felt like the romance never reached a satisfying peak. In my opinion, the way that all 3 of these issues could have been solved is when Damon gave an offer to Isla. If Isla had just taken up that offer, it would have been like an additional couple of chapters, but it would have solved all 3 of these problems. Just saying. But I still thought this book was like okay. It wasn't bad. I don't think that like it will be satisfying to read it like alone. However, I think Lisa's other books will be good because she has such a strong writing style. So I found Damon just okay, so I gave it 3 stars, and it is an okay 3 stars and not an I like it 3 stars. And then I read the only book in March that I genuinely disliked, and this is Heroes Are Extinct Volume 1 by Ryoji Hito. So I'm not having really good luck with this publishing. It's digital manga publishing. I'm not having good luck with these ones. I don't think I'm gonna read more of digital manga publishing, because I think that it's like a publisher that their types of manga that they publish aren't for me. In this series, it follows this guy Cassiel, and Cassiel here, he's like a hero for his planet, and he watches a lot of anime and a lot of like superhero TV shows from Earth, and so he wants to go invade Earth, and he's hoping for like a super epic like battle, like what he sees in like Power Rangers, for example. However, when he gets to Earth, he discovers there's no heroes, and he decides that because he wants to have this epic battle so much, he is going to create his own team of superheroes so he can eventually have the battle. So he does that, and he basically creates knockoff Power Rangers. So as you can probably tell, the plot is like over the top ridiculous, to the point where like I didn't really like it. I know that people might find it entertaining. I don't. I found it really cheesy and annoying, and I found it frankly pretty boring. And I also found most of the characters in here to be boring and annoying. And the only thing that I actually liked about this book is Princess of Velvet. Let me see if I can find a good picture of her. Here's Princess Velvet. I feel like she wasn't made to be like the most likable character in here. However, she's the one I liked the most. She was the one that was least annoying to me, and I actually found her personality pretty cool, and if the story had focused on her, I probably would have actually liked it. So I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. I don't like it, you might like it, but it's not for me. So those are the books that I read in the month of March. I hope all of you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me. If you haven't already, I try and upload a video at least once a week. In between my main long videos, you will find that I post a lot on my YouTube shorts. I post a lot of my cosplays there, so go on over to my YouTube shorts if you want to see my cosplays. All of my other social media will be linked down in the description below, and I hope you are all having a great start to your April. Until next time, everyone, goodbye!